welcome to another week of Math 060 Math Study Skills. This week we're going to be talking about effective studying. This is a little bit different from the homework video from a couple of weeks ago. In homework, you're specifically trying to learn a certain type of material by going through some specific problems. When we talk about studying, we're assuming that you're studying for a quiz or for a test where there's going to be lots of different kinds of problems. So you're not necessarily just studying how to specifically do a certain kind of problem, but learning about the vocabulary, learning about distinguishing different types of problems from other types of problems, and preparing to get into that quiz or test mode. Of course, studying can be hard work, it can be time consuming, and it can be difficult to learn things. That's one of the things that's generally true for, more true for some areas than for other areas. And for a lot of people, studying and learning math is definitely hard work. Sometimes it can seem like a waste of time. If you put in a lot of time and you don't get the result you want, then it feels like, well, why did I even bother to put in the time? I probably could have gotten just that same kind of result with a lot less time. But if you find that happening, it probably means you're not studying very effectively. And one of the things about effective studying is it's meant to maximize your learning in as little time as possible. It still takes time. Don't get me wrong. You still need plenty of time to do it. But hopefully we can get better results in less time than you may have put in before. Or at least the same amount of time as you put in before, but you get better results, you get better test scores, you get better learning, which is ultimately what we're after. And that's the key thing there. Effective studying means you are learning the material. All right? Studying isn't just an activity that we do, it's an activity that we need to do and monitor. And if we don't appear to be learning from our studying, then it's not effective and we need to change how we do it. As with everything else, it is a skill, and we can get better at effective studying by practicing it, learning about it, keeping an eye on it, improving it. So a big chunk of effective studying is about getting things right. Effective studying will happen in the right place, at the right time, with the right equipment, the right attitude, and the right goals. It sounds like a lot of rights, a lot of things to keep track of. And it may sound like it just takes a lot of luck for all those things to come together at once, but that's not true. You have all the control you need to make sure that you are in the right place. You know where good places are to study. To make sure it's the right time, you know that you should be studying a bit in advance of when tests are, not necessarily the night or the hour before. You know what the right equipment is in terms of your textbook and things to write with and paper and notes and things. The right attitude, that's up to you. You've got to do your best to bring the most positive attitude you can to bear when you're trying to learn and study. And ultimately, the right goals. What are your goals in your studying process? How well are you trying to learn it? What specifically are you trying to learn? And it makes a difference if you think about what those goals are and set them up front. Ultimately, you have the control and you need to exercise that control. All right, so right place, right time, right equipment, right attitude, right goals. Here are some suggestions. All right, so establish times when you will study math. Preferably these are as soon after class is over as possible. Depending on your work schedule and your other class schedule, it's not always easy to get to it really quickly, and that's why we say as soon as possible. That may be that evening, it may not be till the next day, but whatever works for you. Rework your notes and work on homework. That's a good part of studying. And you need to have time for effective studying just as well as you need to have time for those other things. And you want to try to, as much as possible, make these times a part of your routine. It's hard sometimes to set that time aside early in a semester because you're not that busy. But if you don't get it set aside early in the semester, it's not available later in the semester when you really start to need it. You want to find a good place to study. You want it to be free of the things that distract you. And again, those are different from one person to the next. I don't have any list of things that specifically are distracting. You need to figure out what distracts you and try to minimize those things when you study. Ideally, it'll be the same place every time, or at least a very similar place. And you want to make sure that you have all of the materials, that is the equipment that you need, there with you when you go to study. Having a goal helps to motivate your study. All right. Sometimes they're goals for the specific test, sometimes they're goals for the class, sometimes they're goals farther out in terms of your career. You might be targeting a specific grade on the test or the quiz or in the class. You may be targeting a specific GPA overall that you want to graduate with. You may have decided that you're just going to pass this class on the first try. You're not going to pass it on a second try. You may want to set rewards for yourself. All right. If you get an A on this test, you're going to go to the dairy fill and have some ice cream, or you're going to buy that book you've been wanting to get, or something like that. And it doesn't even have to be monetary type things, but you can come up with ways to kind of reward yourself. But whatever you do, you want to make sure that you are not letting yourself get away with not studying. So you want to make sure that you're studying. In other words, a lot of negatives in that statement. Let's make it positive. Make sure that you spend time studying. Studying with others can help provide motivation. If someone else expects to meet with you at a certain time in a certain place, you're more likely to be there and to do that. And the big trick to it is making sure you stay focused. It's really easy when you're working with others to kind of turn into gab sessions, if you will, where you spend more time talking about other things and less time studying. So you need to stay focused, and that can be difficult, but that extra impetus of someone else relying on you can be a good form of motivation to help you study. Always a good idea to review the material first, including old material that may be relevant. You want to work on learning new material after class as soon as possible. That's all the time, because that will help you learn quicker and make the studying easier when you finally get to it. If you need to study for a quiz or a test, make sure you've learned the new material first before you start to study. Learning the material, doing the homework is different from then studying the material. When you're studying, you will be doing a little learning, but hopefully most of your learning is done and you're reinforcing your learning when you're actually into the studying mode. Schedule breaks. Don't try to go in for long marathon sessions. And make sure that you are learning the material well in advance of the tests. You shouldn't be trying to learn new things. You really shouldn't even be studying much in the hours or even just in the 24 hours before a test. You'd like those things to be done earlier. The night before a test, the day before a test, hopefully instead of learning material, your studying is focused on simply reviewing the material, reinforcing things, helping make sure that you aren't forgetting stuff. So your study sessions should be more than just reading the book in your notes. You're going to need to be active in practice. You're going to need to retry problems, homework problems, problems that were examples in the class, examples from your book, things that you have answers to so you can check yourself. And yeah, I mentioned that word again, practice, title of the slide. But everything that you've been doing, everything that's been recommended so far, has been all about lots of practice. You're practicing study skills, you're practicing math, you're practicing lots of different ideas. And the more you practice, the more effective you are. Again, if you already know how to do the material, your practice at this point is review. So some more tips on how to study. Really powerful ideas to figure out what you know and what you don't know. Try some problems, quiz yourself over vocabulary and things, create sample quizzes, tests from your problem log, but figure out what you know and what you don't know. And then kind of divide things up into three categories: the kinds of things that you're always getting right, the kinds of things you're never getting right, and the kinds of things that you get right at least some of the time. All right? The things that you're getting right all the time, you don't need to spend that much time on. Don't forget about them. Don't ignore them. But don't spend too much time on them. The things that you get right some of the time are the things where you should put in your initial focus and your time and your energy, because those are the things that are going to be easiest to move from some of the time to all of the time. And then finally, once you've done that, then work on the things you don't ever seem to get right and see if you can start to move them to maybe some of the time, or hopefully all of the time. And again, don't forget to go back and occasionally review those types of problems that you were getting right all of the time. When you don't understand something, get help. Ask somebody. Continue working on those notes, rewriting things in your own word, clarifying, expanding, correcting anything that you have in your notes. For some people, it really helps to create flashcards. You can put vocabulary terms, concepts, rules, laws, theorems, examples of problem types, examples of problems. You can put whatever you want to on your flashcards. They're entirely yours. But if that's something that can help you, make use of it. And don't be afraid to use your textbook. All right. It organizes material for you in ways that can help you identify problems. Sometimes it has a glossary. Sometimes there's information inside the covers. Sometimes there are appendices. Understand how your textbook is set up and the kind of information it has available. A few last tips. If you tend to study more than one subject at a time when you sit down to study, it's a good idea to always start with the hardest one first. So if math is your hardest subject and you plan on doing some math studying and studying for some other subjects, start with math. And then try to work from the hardest to the easiest for you. It's a good idea to finish with your easiest subject last. And finally, if you're taking more than one math class at a time, that doesn't happen that often, but occasionally students do this, try not to study both math classes in the same study time period. Try to separate them. If you separate them in time with things in between them, it will help you keep the material in those classes separate as well, so that you're not necessarily confusing one class with the other, which can really become problematical in a test situation.